So there's somebody I've been dying to talk to you about. It's Kyle Hamilton, the safety out of Notre Dame. He's prospect of the day, and I want to do a deep dive here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
Ooh-wee! You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. And today on the show, thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Today on the show, let's talk about Kyle Hamilton, safety out of Notre Dame. There is a deeper conversation about him than you would think for a guy who, like most people project, is going to be pretty far out of reach for the Vikings. But he's experiencing a bit of a fall in his draft stock if the mock drafts in aggregate are to be believed. And I think that kind of reflects the general community attitude. If the NFL agrees with the community is another thing. We can never really know that. But I don't know, the odds of him actually falling within striking distance of the Vikings is starting to look like it's going up. And so I think it's worth talking about this guy. So let's talk about who he is and his traits and stuff. He's prospect of the day. And crucially, let's talk about how you deal with a falling player. Let's talk about trading up and have that whole conversation too, as well as we'll talk about some 40 time stuff and some things with Hamilton as well that I think are some dumb narratives that have gotten a little bit overblown. But first, I guess let's talk about draft stock and trading up and stuff. So if you're a fan of all the draft charts, you probably hold an opinion that trading down is better than trading up. And I think in the aggregate, the team who trades down is almost always getting the better deal. It's very rare that you have like a Julio Jones situation where the Falcons traded up and then it was all very clearly worth it. More often, you get more bites at the apple and you end up, getting a better chance at finding a good player, maybe a chance at finding multiple good players. It's just always going to be a better position. But trading is just exchanging liquid assets, right? And in theory, we've seen enough draft trades. We've seen enough value in the draft. We could put together what even value is and sort of understand. And I think the NFL has largely done that. And I think the closest approximation that we have as the public is the Rich Hill draft chart, which is based off of historical trades and essentially tries to sort of estimate the market, right? What does it cost to move from pick 30 to pick 15, et cetera? So I'll be using that for all the calculations here. But thinking less from a value numbers perspective and thinking more from a logic perspective. Let's logic out the math instead of just taking numbers blankly and trying to memorize them. Because look, even as much as Kyle Hamilton falling out of the top 10 is becoming a question people are asking, I think the likelihood of it is still pretty low. So the question is not, hey, if Kyle Hamilton falls to 12, are you taking him? I mean, for me, I'm slamming him, sure. But it's not a question of if he falls to 12. It's a question of how far does he fall before we start thinking about trading up? And do we at all, right? Maybe your answer is we don't. We take him at 12 or we don't take him at all. So with trade ups, generally, you're swimming upstream. There is a current, right? And it's easier to go downstream than upstream. And that means that if you're going to trade down in the draft, if you have pick 5 and you want to trade down to pick 12, you're probably going to end up generally with more value. It's going to be an inefficient prospect to trade up. Now, inefficiency doesn't mean never do it ever. It just means that it is inefficient to do it, and you kind of have to have a good excuse. So the way I like to think about it is this. We usually think of draft picks, when you have the first overall pick, that means you get the best player in the draft, right? Or whoever you think the best player in the draft is. And if you have the second pick, you get the second best player, the second best opportunity to draft a player, and the third best player and the fourth best player. And in reality, I think we all know and can acknowledge that it doesn't follow a linear path like that. But when we start talking about trade charts and value and points on the Jimmy Johnson and the whatever, we sort of start talking about it that way, right? It is sort of necessarily implied that if, you're going after points on a draft chart, it's that the second pick is statically worth this many points and you have to make that many points, right? But static is the last word that I would use to describe the NFL draft. It is anything but static. So the question becomes, when do we pull the trigger, right? And there's a few easy benchmarks. The way I like to do it is I like to take whatever pick the Vikings have and I say, okay, if they trade their second rounder along with their first rounder, where does that get them on the chart? And that's a much more, I think, practical, tangible, real world way to talk about it instead of me droning on about 347 plus 128 equals blah, blah, blah. You know, I don't want to do that to you. So instead, let's logic it out. So if they packaged pick 46 and pick 12 together and traded up, that could get them all the way up to 5. And then if they wanted to go to 6 or 7 or so on, they could package, they would be getting picks in return to kind of make change, I guess would be a way to say that. So you can get all the way up to 5 if you wanted to package your first this year and second this year, or similarly, their first this year and their first next year would come around at about the same value. If they wanted to package their third rounder, pick 77 on the Rich Hill chart, that gets them up to about 8. Or a second next year, same value. And then a fourth rounder, which they don't have. So if they wanted to package their third rounder next year, it gets them up to 10. So they can move up a couple spots by giving up a third rounder next year. So instead of thinking, well, what spot would I take Kyle Hamilton? Where is he on my big board? Is he 6th? And then should I take him 5th? Or if he's 8th and I think he's 9th, would I still... Don't think of it that way. Think of it, would you trade 2 first-round picks for Kyle Hamilton? Or a first and a second for Kyle Hamilton? Probably wouldn't. I don't think I would do that. Would you trade a first and a third for Kyle Hamilton? Tough sell. You could talk me into it, but I'm still probably more content to stay put. But a third next year to move up and select Kyle Hamilton, that I can get on board with. So for me, I say if Kyle Hamilton falls past the Seahawks at 9, I would support the Vikings moving up. Now, another thing about this linear idea of the draft, it doesn't go linear, right? The best is like somebody's going to overdraft a quarterback who's like 23rd on someone's board, and he's not like Kenny Pickett is going to be, in the 20s on people's board. That dude's going in the top 15. It really sounds like. So that's going to push everybody down a little bit. So at a certain point, you're going to be up at 12, and player number 9 on your board will be there. And you can just pick that guy and say, great, good value. It's like I moved up 3 spots in the draft for free, right? When it comes to trades, you can sort of abuse this, where instead of, let's say you wanted to move up to 5. Let's get really aggressive. There's a guy you're in love with, just move up to 5. Let's do it for Sauce Gardner, right? People are really into him. And let's say Sauce Gardner is there at pick 5 and you think he's the 5th best player on the board. You would trade up to pick 5 and you would be paying kind of even value for that, right? 100 cents on the dollar. But let's say Sauce Gardner falls to number 7. And then falls to number 8 and you trade up then. And you're still getting the 5th best player, but you only paid what it costs to get up to 8 to get there. And if he falls to 10, you're only paying what it would cost to get the 10th best player, but you're getting the 5th best player. And that's the way you can sort of abuse what happens in the draft. If a player is falling that you have really high on your board, go up and get him. And I think that's what fuels most of the trade ups in the NFL draft, because weird kind of inexact change, the 8th best player is a linebacker, but the team picking at number 8 doesn't need a linebacker. Weird idiosyncrasies like that will cause a player to fall that doesn't necessarily deserve to, and you go up and get him. It's not an arrogance about evaluation. It's just sort of navigating a not perfectly inefficient market. And that is kind of what brings me to Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton's top 5 dude in a lot of people's boards. So if he's there at 10 and you pay what it costs to get up to 10, it's inefficient. If you get the 10th best player there, you made a bad move. You shouldn't trade from 12 to 10 just to get the 10th best player. But if you trade from 12 to 10 to get the 5th best player, that's efficient. And that is where you can talk me into a trade up. So let's talk about Kyle Hamilton himself and kind of where we would go if we have him. And there's a lot of stuff about his evaluation that's kind of confusing. And let's talk about this really exciting player that might get within striking distance. First things first, though, let me talk to you about Shady Rays. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed, durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Also, something you won't find anywhere else is Shady Rays' insane protection program. program. Shady Rays includes lost and broken protection on every pair. They'll send you a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter what happened. Give them a try, and if you don't love them, you pay nothing. Simple as that. Plus, 10 meals will be donated to fight hunger in America when you shop with Shady Rays exclusively for our listeners. Head to shadyrays.com, use code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, one word, to get 50% off of 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's code LOCKEDON for their best deal of the season. 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses, backed by over 150,000 verified 5-star reviews. So moving off the value conversation, let's talk about actual Kyle Hamilton a little bit. Kyle Hamilton is a 6'4" safety. I tweeted out earlier when I was researching stuff for this episode and for an article that I've kind of partner article that I've written for this. What if Harrison Smith was 6'4"? That's essentially what you're getting here. If that doesn't excite you, I don't know what will. Harrison Smith as a prospect had a kind of a similar profile to Kyle Hamilton coming out, and Harrison Smith didn't have the height or the size, and I don't think he had quite as many like flashy wowza plays as Hamilton did, which is why he was more of a late first, early second kind of prospect that then outplayed that. But ran a 40 that was, I think, 4.54, and Hamilton's is 4.59, so kind of a similar speed deal. They both had kind of, inconsistent in man, but makes lots of heady plays. A lot of their evaluations are both kind of more about how much they understand the game and how they can see the game and how slow the game is for them and stuff. And less about like winning with like raw, crazy athletic ability. It's kind of easy to go there with the Notre Dame thing too. So I think it's actually a reasonable comp is 6'4" Harrison Smith. So what if you got Harrison Smith and then a tall one, and then those were your safeties? I feel like we would all take that. So that's why I'm excited about Kyle Hamilton. Everything else is on the fringes. It's on the perimeter. It's other stuff about him. But I guess let's talk about the 40, because that's the biggest thing that people are talking about. They're calling him a slow safety. 4.59 ain't bad. It's like in the 55th percentile. It's average. It's not becoming of a top 5 pick, but it's okay. It's not a deal breaker. It's not like he's running, a 5-second 40 or anything. But like beyond that, it's a 40 time. And 40 times are not the end all be all of speed. And speed is not the end all be all of evaluation. I think we all understand that there's more to eval than that. But a 40 time doesn't tell you how fast the dude plays. And the dude plays faster than he tested. So why does that happen? And the answer to that is that he leaves earlier. And I say it all the time. I think I've said it in Twitter Tuesdays about Kyle Hamilton. The best way to get there 2 steps sooner is to leave 2 steps earlier. And that's like, if you can read the play and get out and break on the ball faster, it doesn't matter. Like, I'd rather have that than somebody who can't break on the ball faster, but can like make it up with speed. Speed makes up a deficit that you get. Speed makes up a deficit that you end up with when you didn't leave on time. But if you leave on time, you don't need to have elite speed to make elite plays. Now, there are plays, when I was researching, like I found a few plays where it's like he starts on the other side of the formation and it's a breakaway run and he has to end up being the guy chasing it down to the sideline, and it like he doesn't get there as fast as you want, but he still makes the play. And it's like, that's the worst that this gets. This is not a concern to me. And think about like a 40-yard dash, like practically, right? How does this simulate football? Because when is a safety running 40 yards in a straight line? They'll run 20 yards sometimes in a straight line, but they'll usually line up 15, maybe 20 yards off the ball if it's super conservative. So get to the ball, that's 20 yards, right? If you are lining up 15 yards off the ball, you're not running backwards in a straight line 40 more yards unless it's a 55-yard pass attempt, and you're playing that differently. A 55-yard throw is not a mad sprint unless you're up against like Usain Bolt. And if they got Usain Bolt on the safety, something has already gone wrong, right? So there isn't the football field is only 35 yards across and it's only 100 yards deep, and you usually line up 15 or 20 off the ball as an off-ball safety. You're not running 40 in a straight line. Now, the 20 split and the 10 split matter a little bit more for this. Sometimes you do run 20 yards or 10 yards in a straight line, and he's better on those, and it was more the top speed that kind of topped out. And look, he's like 6'4". He's a taller guy. He does have good gliding strides and stuff, but that you're not going to be the shiftiest dude. And that's the other thing is he's not like a shifty agile. When you put him in the slot against a shifty slot corner, he does better than you'd expect for his size, but like for his size. All that said, he's a very versatile piece because he can hold up okay in the slot. You can put him in the slot if you have to. You'd probably rather put somebody dedicated in there, but if you have to, you can. And that means that you can get away with formations that need to put a safety in the slot. You can like get away with it. And that usually will open you up to gain an advantage somewhere else. He played off ball at Notre Dame a lot, and I think you can put him in the box. He's not the most like physical safety, but he's a D-back. Like this is not a block shedding job necessarily. You need to be able to do run support. You need to not be totally useless, and he's not. And he can actually shoot gaps sometimes too, but he does have a little bit of a run angle issue. So those are the weaknesses, and they're all on the periphery. Otherwise, you have a dude that can see the play developing, can go and attack it, can go make a play on the ball, get an interception, and have and like be pretty exciting there. So the other thing that people I think overthink about Kyle Hamilton is his versatility. So that's the next thing that I want to talk about. But first, let me talk to you about the best tasting protein bar on the planet. It's Built Bar. Built Bar is covered in 100% chocolate. They have one of my favorite things that they make is their Built Puffs, which is like a marshmallowy one. And it tastes like a marshmallow coated chocolate thing, like something you'd get at Easter. It rocks. Feels absolutely like cheating. It's like churro marshmallow puff or like a key lime one that they have. That's really awesome. And it's got like 130 calories, maybe, like 4 grams of sugar, and then like 17 grams of protein. Compare that to an actual candy bar that has like 300 calories and like 30 grams of sugar. And it's just this disgusting nightmare for anybody trying to lose or maintain weight. This guy won't knock you off the wagon, this Built Bar guy over here. So maybe go check it out. You can enter promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15 at built.com, and you can get 15% off of your order. That's promo code LOCKED15, all one word, at built.com. Moving on, last thing I want to talk about with Kyle Hamilton is the idea of versatility, and he's gotten a label. I've seen some people talk about him as like a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Where, and this is where the logic goes. Like if you see somebody discussing him on Twitter, the logic is like, well, I can't put him in the slot. He's not reliable enough there. He's been beaten too many times in man coverage. Part of that's like kind of the agility thing. You can't put him as like a rangy off-ball safety. He doesn't have the 40 time for that. You can't put him in the box. He's not big enough for that, and he doesn't have any. And his run angles are too bad. So you can't put him anywhere. What are you going to do with him? He doesn't have a role. And you'll hear people talk about like, I don't know what his job is. I don't know what his role is. And then you compare that with charting data. And specifically, I think this is people misreading PFF data. PFF does a great job of charting alignments, right? It's one of my favorite things that I use them for all the time is like snap counts and alignments and kind of that super objective charting data. And with Kyle Hamilton, a huge majority of his snaps came pretty far off the ball. He didn't line up as a box safety. And I think people are taking a bit of a shortcut there where they say, well, he didn't line up in the box, therefore he's not a Cam Chancellor type box safety. Now, he has a lot of really good plays in run defense. Like, he is good at run defense. He's not blowing up offensive linemen. He does mess up. He's got some lowlights too, but like, him in run support is a good thing. It's a positive thing on the whole. It's just sometimes those plays don't look as sexy, so they don't get as much run, but they're there and they're frequent enough to make me feel pretty excited about him as a safety. So I challenge the people who say that about Kyle Hamilton, that he can't go anywhere. What's his role? I challenge you, your creativity a little bit. I think that is an uncreative way to look at Kyle Hamilton. And I'm not saying you have to be creative to use him. I'm saying you have to be not the most vanilla, like Madden, Our Lads type deal. Like, what position are you going to list him as? Who cares? I know what roles he's going to do, and he's going to do all of them throughout the game. And he's going to, depends on the coverage in the front and all that stuff, he is going to do everything. And that's what makes him valuable, that he can be a piece of everything and you can run everything. Something with a very specialized safety core that really got those Seahawks defenses in trouble down the stretch when guys started getting older and it was kind of not the meta anymore. When you have an Earl Thomas and a Cam Chancellor, one is very much the rangy guy, one is very much the box guy. Teams can put you in a situation where one of those guys is doing a thing that they can't do, right? Earl Thomas needing to be a box safety was never going, like that was something you could take advantage of. And there's a lot of the great upsets in history, in all of football history, have come down to that, to finding a superstar player, the one thing he's never asked to do, and then forcing the issue and making it so that he does it. Let me give you a super retro example. Mick Tingelhoff, Super Bowl IV. Mick Tingelhoff was an undersized center. He was a small center. He was very much like an explosive. They called him Quick Mick. He was not a big guy. He was not a strength type guy. He was very tough. He always got up for it. He had his start streak, and he was a quick, like, run out and chase down a linebacker, kick out on a screen type of guy. So in Super Bowl IV, they had Curly Culp, who was a big, giant nose tackle who ended up in the Hall of Fame himself. And that kicked Mick Tingelhoff's ass. Mick Tingelhoff got his ass kicked in that game. And that's the kind of thing you want to avoid. So you say, I don't know where he goes. I say, I don't know where he doesn't go. And that is what I'm way more excited about with Kyle Hamilton. And that's why I would be super willing to move up to get him. I think he is easily a top 10 player. He might be a top 5 player. I probably wouldn't move up to 5, but I would move up pretty close to that if he started falling, if I were in charge of the Vikings. One last thing to sort of circle back to the value conversation. Sometimes there are 2 guys, and then you don't need to move. So let's say you've got 2 guys in the top 5, and for whatever reason, they are both falling. And there's not like a Laramie Tunsilweed video or anything. So you are really happy that these 2 guys are falling. You wouldn't trade up to get your choice of the 2, right? Wait for one of them to go and then trade up to the next spot. That's, I think, the way that I would do that with Stingley and Sauce and Hamilton. Those are my big 3. If one of those 3 guys ends up on the Vikings, I'm really, really, really happy. Other guys, I probably have to talk myself into it a little more. There's a lot of players I'm not yet familiar with, though. So we're going to get into them. Hopefully I can get into the wide receivers and the edge rushers a little bit more on this show in future episodes. We will talk about that. In the meantime, hey, check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast and make sure you subscribe to that, because we're doing the ultimate mock draft there the week leading up to the draft. And you can find me on there drafting for the Vikings and every other Locked On host drafting for their respective teams. And they also, on the Locked On NFL Draft YouTube page, they're going to be live covering the draft. And I'll be on there too when the Vikings pick. So check out all that stuff out, and I will talk to you all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.